On the morning of June 17, 1939, Eugen Weidmann became the last person to be publicly executed in France. He was executed by way of the guillotine, which had been the only method of execution in France since 1792. Weidmann was born on February 5, 1908, in Frankfurt, Germany. At the beginning of World War I, he was sent to live with his grandparents. It was during this time that he began his career as a thief and would later be sent to a juvenile detention facility. In his 20s, he would serve a 5-year sentence in Saarbrücken jail for robbery. While in jail, Weidmann met two men who would later become his partners in crime, Roger Millian and Jean Blanc. After they were released from jail, they came up with a scheme in which they would kidnap rich tourists visiting France and steal their money, and they rented a villa in Saint-Cloud near Paris for this purpose. Their first kidnapping attempt was a failure, as their victim struggled too hard, forcing them to let him escape. In July 1937, Weidmann made the acquaintance of Jean de Cauvin, a 22-year-old dancer from Boston, Massachusetts, visiting her aunt, Ida Sackheim, in Paris. De Cauvin was taken with Weidmann, writing to a friend, "I have just met a charming German of keen intelligence who calls himself Siegfried." In the letter, she explains that she will be visiting Siegfried at his villa, which was near the Château de Malmaison, made famous by Napoleon and Josephine. During their meeting, they smoked, and Weidmann gave Jean a glass of milk. Jean took photos of him with her new camera. Weidmann then strangled Jean and buried her in the villa's garden along with her camera, the developed film later showing her murderer. She had 300 francs in cash and $430 in traveler's checks, which Roger Millian's mistress, Colette Tricot, later cashed. Jean's aunt, Ida Sackheim, later received a letter demanding $500 for the return of her niece, and Jean's brother Henry later came to France, offering a 10,000 franc reward from his father for information about Jean. On September 1st of the same year, Weidmann hired a chauffeur named Joseph Koufi to drive him to the French Riviera, where in a forest outside Tours, he shot Koufi in the back of his neck and stole his car and 2,500 francs. His next murder came just 2 days later, on September 3rd, after Weidmann and Roger Millian lured Janine Keller, a private nurse, into a cave in the forest of Fontainebleau under the false pretenses of a job as a governess. Weidmann killed Keller with another fatal shot to the back of her neck before robbing her body of 1,400 francs and a diamond ring. On the 16th of October, Millian and Weidmann arranged a meeting with a young theatrical producer named Roger Leblanc, promising to invest money in one of his shows. Instead, Weidmann shot him in the back of his head and took his wallet, which contained 5,000 francs. On the 22nd of November, Weidmann murdered and robbed Fritz Frommer, a young German he had met in jail, using his usual method of execution, a shot to the back of his neck. Frommer, a Jew, had been in jail for his anti-Nazi views. His body was buried in the basement of the Saint-Cloud villa, where Jean de Cauvin's body was also buried. 5 days later, Weidmann committed his final murder. Raymond Lesobre, a real estate agent, was shot in the back of his head while showing Weidmann a house in Saint-Cloud, and 5,000 francs were taken from him. Weidmann was eventually caught when officers from the Sûreté, led by a young inspector, eventually tracked him to the Saint-Cloud villa from a business card left at Lesobre's office. Arriving at his home, Weidmann found 2 officers waiting for him. He invited them in and then turned and fired 3 times at them with a pistol. Although they were unarmed, the wounded officers managed to wrestle Weidmann down and knocked him unconscious with a hammer. Once Weidmann was in custody, he confessed to all of the murders. The only murder which he seemed to regret was that of Jean de Cauvin, having expressed tearfully, "She was gentle and unsuspecting. When I reached for her throat, she went down like a doll." The murder trial of Eugen Weidmann, Roger Millian, Jean Blanc, and Colette Tricot took place in Versailles in March 1939 and was the biggest since that of Henri Landru 18 years earlier. Weidmann and Millian received the death sentence, with Millien's sentence being later commuted to life imprisonment. Jean Blanc received a prison sentence of only 20 months, and Colette Tricot was acquitted. Weidmann's sentence was carried out on June 17th. He was taken out in front of the prison of Saint-Pierre, where the guillotine was waiting for him. Also waiting was a loud, clamoring crowd of spectators. Among the crowd was the future acting legend Christopher Lee, then just 17 years old. Weidmann was placed into the guillotine, and the blade fell. The behavior of the crowd following the execution was denounced as disgusting and unruly, using handkerchiefs to dab up Weidmann's blood as souvenirs. The behavior of the crowd delayed the execution beyond the usual twilight hour of dawn, enabling clear photographs and one short film to be taken. Following the execution, French President Albert Lebrun immediately banned all future public executions.